Good morning, everyone, and thank you again for listening to Word of Faith Responds. It's great to be with you today. Today I have Rich Dolan back with us. Rich was here on Wednesday, and if you missed the first part of his testimony, you can go back to our website and watch it. Our website is wordoffaithfellowship.org, and you'll see a radio program link, and it's going to be very easy to find. It'll be the last one that we did there. By the way, all of our radio programs that we have done now for 5 months are on our website, and we have lots of encouraging testimonies there. We also give a lot of truth about the many allegations that have been raised against our church over the years, and we actually tell you the truth about all of those allegations. And so please go to our website and learn more about that. But I asked Rich to come back because he did not finish. He's actually just right in the middle of sharing an amazing testimony about his life and what Jesus did. And so on Wednesday, he started off when he was a child. And to just catch you up in case you were not listening on Wednesday, Rich had a tragedy when he was 6 years old. His dad was fishing, trout fishing, and actually ended up dying in the river. His uncle tried to save him. His uncle ends up dying as well. This left Rich's mother to raise him and his 4 other siblings. And Rich ended up having a very rough childhood. One of the things that happened after his dad died was the priest, he was Catholic, and the priest came to tell Rich the reason why his dad died was God needed his dad more than Rich did. These words actually really hurt Rich. He really got offended, and at that point a lot of anger came in him, anger against God, and he didn't quite realize how much anger came in until later on in his life. But he became a very angry child, very resistant to any type of authority, and so by the time he was 15 he started drinking. A very upset young man. By the time he was 16, started doing very serious drugs. So this brings us to where we left off. He actually went on, and he was sharing with you on Wednesday how he went to college, went to surveying school, and then from there went on to engineering school. And where we left off on Wednesday was he was at an engineering school. He's staying in an apartment and had 2 units with some other students, and he finds out that these other students, all of the students in this apartment, are all doing drugs together. And so he decides to just join them, and so they're all doing it together. And this is where we left off. It's so important, when we share about what Jesus has done, because it's amazing the different backgrounds that I personally have seen and listened to, just even in our church, how God's just brought people from all different backgrounds. It really doesn't matter. You may come from one situation or another, but it's amazing that Jesus Christ can take whatever background we had and just pick up the pieces, heal us, restore us, and bring us into his path. So that's what you're going to hear about today. So Rich, and by the way, I do want to say that we have his wife with us as well today, Lorraine, and she's going to get to share a little bit at the end too. So just stay tuned and listen to this wonderful testimony.
Good morning, Jim, and thanks again. I want to go right back where I started on Wednesday, or not started, where I ended on Wednesday. And the apartment I was staying in, there were only 2 apartments. It was right across from the college, and we'd been passing these other 2 guys that lived in the apartment, and we would talk and stuff. And one day we could smell that they were in there getting high, so we knocked on the door and asked them if they wanted to get high with us, and that began a relationship that we were there all the time. And as the time went on, we were over there one night, and these guys came and knocked on our door. There was 3 of them, and I answered the door. I didn't open the door. I just looked out the door, and I asked them what they wanted, and they said they wanted to buy some drugs from us. And I said, we don't have any drugs. And we didn't know them. We weren't going to say anything like that. And I need to back up a second. The guys next door were dealing large quantities of drugs, and that's why we spent time over there, because we were basically getting free drugs, from them. And that's how that came about. I didn't want to go too fast here, but and the other guys got up and came to the door. There were about six of us in there altogether, and they turned around and left. And in just a few minutes, we could hear them down at the main door, and I'd run down and locked it when they'd left the first time, and they were down there kicking the door in. So we all ran down there, and as soon as the door opened, the guy pulls a sawed-off shotgun up in our faces, and of course we all threw our hands up, and we were terrified. And they'd come in to rob us of the drugs that the other guys were selling. Not actually, well, they robbed us too, because they took our stuff out of our wallets, but they were going after what these guys had. And I was always tried to be a tough guy, but let me tell you, I was not a tough guy. I was crying, asking them, please don't kill us. I've been around guns all my life. It was a single shot shotgun. A sawed-off the hammer was cocked, and just a bump of that trigger, and somebody would have been dead. It was very, very serious. Anyways, they taped us up. They taped our hands. They put tape across their mouths. And they knew exactly where the drugs were. It was a setup, and they went and got them and left. It was very quick. Mm-hmm. They didn't waste any time or anything. We managed to get the tape off of us and get undone. And I had major fear before this. And this is, like I said Wednesday, Satan has a plan and God has a plan. And this was part of his plan, to get me to be angrier, to get me to, go deeper into the things that he had for me. And, after that night, I slept with a loaded gun beside my bed. Just the fear had just taken us over. All of us were terrified. Anyway, a few days after that, it was like blinders came off my eyes, and I could see what I was doing, how stupid it was, how dangerous it was. And these other people that, here we were right here with these guys that are dealing drugs. We could have all been killed. And I was like, it was, I didn't see it before. I couldn't see anything but what we were doing and what we wanted. And after that, it just was so clear. And we lived right across from the college, and there was 4 sets of railroad tracks between us and the college. And I went over there and I sat down on the railroad tracks. And I said, actually, in the process of doing that, I was hearing God remind me of the things that people had said to me as I was growing up, like my mom. She was saying to me, Rich, no matter what, you can trust God. It doesn't matter the circumstances, you can trust God. And then I remembered of this one man that I had been so ugly to one day, and he told me, he said, son, I'm going to pray for you. And all these things God brought back to my remembrance. And it was at that point I was sitting on those railroad tracks, and I told God, and I didn't know who Jesus was. I just knew God was, he was supposed to be the one that was in charge. He's supposed to be the one that made everything. And I told him, I said, God, if you'll get me out of this mess, I'll serve you. And I didn't feel any goosebumps. I didn't feel anything per se. I was pretty hard. And it, like I said, those blinders went, and every desire I had for the alcohol, for the drugs, was gone. It was almost like I had a hatred for it. And I can't tell you I would have said I hated it then, but it was like I had a hatred for it. And it was at that point that, again, I had heard this voice, and I didn't know it was God talking to me. I thought, oh, this just makes common sense, Rich, just... But I heard this voice say, move away from there. And I finished, that was almost at the end of the semester. I finished there, and I never saw those two guys ever again. And my old roommate I saw maybe a half a dozen times after that. But it was a place where God had me totally cut those relationships off. And in that process there, I had met a girl, and it was a real quick thing. We got married, and God didn't say. And it was very, very rough. And at this point, I'm just trying to hear what I need to do. I mean, it was like, I know I got to go to church and I got to be a good boy. And that was what was put in me, And I married this girl, and in a 2-year span, she started running around on me. And there was, at one point there was a night that we'd had in where I was living. We'd had this enormous amount of snow. Then a heavy rain came. We had a very, very, very bad flood where her father had a sporting goods store. And we were in the store putting stuff up as the flood came in. Well, that night, I don't remember what time it was. We walked out in hip boots across this one area before the water got really high, because my wife at that time was a diabetic, and we needed to get her insulin and so on. And me and this other guy got out. I had parked my Jeep up on a ridge, and I had to drive through the water to get out of there, and it was just right almost up to the window. And we went and got my father-in-law's boat that had a motor on it, and we started back in. Now it was frigid. The wind was blowing like 40 miles an hour. It was maybe 10 degrees. The water would blow up on you and it'd freeze when it hit you. It was very, very bad. And we got the boat. We started back to the sports shop, and it just wouldn't go against the wind. So I had hip boots on, and I jumped out, and I'm trying to, everything is water in front of you, and you're trying to remember where the road is so we could stay, where, I could walk with the hip boots. And I'm pulling the boat, and I stepped off a wall and went up to the water to my neck. It strangled me. It was so cold. I mean, it was all I could do to take a breath. And I pulled myself back up in the boat, and I knew I couldn't do it. The boat wasn't going to go anywhere. So I jumped back out of the boat, and I headed through the water, and I'm breaking through the ice. And again, if anybody's ever been in that frigid water, it just strangles you. You can't talk. You can't hardly breathe. And I see this house that's like on an island. And now I'm headed for this house, and these people happen to be watching. So when I got to their door, they took me in, took all my clothes off, wrapped me in blankets, started pouring coffee in me. And, if they wouldn't have been home, I'd have died. There's no way I could have withstood that cold. And, again, the keeping miracle, working power of God. My dad, when he drowned, it was freezing cold. Right. And the devil was trying to take me down, just like he did him.
Right.
So anyway, it was shortly after that I got a divorce. And I was going to the Catholic Church, and there was this one part in the Mass where they were reading a scripture, and I'd never read a Bible. I'd never read a Bible prior to this. And it talked about 1 Corinthians 13. And it was just what I needed. Here I was going through a bad divorce. I mean, the devil, he just kept trying to put all this hurt on me, all this abuse, all this, anger. And so after the church service, I was like, God, I need this. I'm going to go home. I'm going to read about this. And I remembered my nanny had given me a Bible when I got married. So I went home and I found that Bible and I opened it up, and she'd written in the front of it, and this is God's hand. God prepared this from the days before. And she said, Rich and Connie, this is my love gift to you. And she wrote all about 1 Corinthians 13. I mean, God so loves us. He prepared that for me. And I didn't even have any idea where 1 Corinthians was. It was the first time I'd opened a Bible. So I went to the index and I opened it up and I read all about it. And that day, it was so clear. I said, God, if I can have anything from you, this is what I want. I want this. This is how I want my life to be. In that same time frame there, my brother John had just come into the things of God. And he stopped. That was right after I got my divorce. And he was living in Buffalo, New York, and he came down. My mom had gotten sick, and he started sharing with me all about Jesus. And he was telling me all about it. He asked me, Rich, is there any reason you wouldn't want Jesus as your Lord and Savior? I said, John, I've tried everything else. I've tried all the mind stuff. I've tried all the witchcraft. I've tried everything. Nothing's working. I said, yes, I want to know Jesus. So he prayed with me. And, at that point, I got so hungry for the things of God. I mean, anybody that was teaching about the Bible, I was listening to it. I mean, I was taking it in. I was reading my Bible every time I could get it, And, the time there where I told you he came down because my mom was dying. Well, she was put in the hospital, and they didn't know what was wrong with her. And she had Hodgkin's disease, which if they'd have found it early enough, they could have treated it and put it in remission. My mom was 61 then. She was still very young. And she had, she'd promised to put all of us children, all 5 of us, through 2 years of college. She said she would work and work until, she could get that done. And, and I'd already had my 2 years, so I had scholarships and stuff. But anyway, she was there in the hospital, and John got to go pray with her and talk to her about Jesus. And, over the next couple days, we saw a transformation in my mom. She called everybody that she'd ever could remember that she had been offended at, angry at, or whatever, and called them up and asked them to forgive her. And then, just a couple days later, she died. Well, here's all this stuff happening again. Just went through a divorce. My mom's dying, and I'm trying to hold on to Jesus. And I'd come home that night. The house was all lit up. There were people everywhere, cars everywhere, and I knew something had happened. So I went in, and they told me my mom had passed away. Well, here they were. They wanted to give me a tranquilizer or anything just so, I'd be able. And I was like, oh, no. no. I don't need anything like that. And so I went upstairs in our house, and I went to God instead of all the other stuff. And I didn't know where to look. I didn't know really anything. Maybe a month since I opened the Bible. And I said, God, I know I've heard you've been the comforter, and I need comforting right now. And I opened my Bible, and it was called The Way, is the brand of the Bible. And I opened it up, and I didn't look for anything. I just opened it up, and I started reading it. It was Psalms 32, and it said, "Blessed are those whose transgressions are forgiven and are ready for the kingdom of heaven." And let me tell you, the peace, the joy was just beyond. And through my mom's funeral, everyone was like, "Are you sure you're all right, Rich?" Because I wasn't broken up. I wasn't, in a place where, I was just sitting there and sobbing or anything like that. Then there was, just every time my brother John would get a teaching tape, he'd send it to me, or if I got one, I'd send it to him, and we were just feeding each other back and forth, And I was surveying at that time, and I got a job in another town, and it wasn't directly surveying because the economy really wasn't selling houses or building and stuff, but I got a job as an assistant manager of an asphalt plant, and I would do the estimations for the jobs, and I would do the for the stockpiles, measure how much stock they had and everything. Well, in that process, I met another guy that was on one of the crews, excuse me, and befriended him, and he was one that would run around to all the bars. Well, I ran around with him, and I sat there and would talk to people and stuff for quite a while, and then start drinking with them. And
now, had you stopped drinking?
Oh, I stopped.
You talked about this time you prayed on the railroad tracks. You never had a desire for alcohol. Did you just stop right there? Is this the first time that you started drinking since you had that time with God?
This was probably 3 years later. Okay. 3 years. And like a week after that, maybe not even that, I'd gone and spent some time with my brother. And God right then said, "You don't need that. You need to move away from there." And I moved within a few days, and I moved to New York. Now, a year before that, because my brother kept trying to get me to move up there with him, I sent a resume out. I sent several resumes, but I sent one to one specific company up there in Buffalo. And a year later, I'm driving on my way to Buffalo, and my sister-in-law calls me and says, "Rich, this guy that's got a surveying company just called me and wanted to know if you were here." And I told him, "No, but you're on your way." And he said, "Well, if you want a job, be there at 8 o'clock in the morning." I mean, I got a job before I got there. And this is how God has always moved in my life when it has come to me obeying his voice.
And this is from the resume you sent 1 year before you were driving up to New York? Had you called the guy at all?
No, I hadn't.
You just happened to be driving 1 year after you sent this resume?
Yeah.
And this man just calls you the day you're coming into New York. That's amazing.
Yes.
Well, let me say, so you're heading to New York. I see we're running out of time here, and I know you somehow get to North Carolina. You get to Word of Faith Fellowship, and I know we have 5 minutes left, and Lorraine's here. Could you just And God's obviously really getting to your heart now. And could you just really you're going to have to move
Okay,
along for
I
time's
will.
sake. Could you just kind of just nutshell in a few minutes how you end up at Word of Faith Fellowship and what God did for you?
Well, when I went to Buffalo, I was there for 5 years. I was praying one night, and God said, move to North Carolina. And the same thing happened. I moved to North Carolina. God had a job for me that day. When I got to North Carolina, I met a friend that was in a church. And
What part of North Carolina?
over in Wilmington area on the coast. And he kept telling me he wanted to go to this one church. I didn't want to go because it was a bad area. We ended up going, and when I went, I was home. That was it. I was there from 85 to 88 and went into the ministry full time in 88. And there's one point I got to make. Myself and the pastor had been crying out to God because we knew there was something else. We needed another place in our lives for God to move. And I'd come into the office one day, and the secretary and this other lady were sitting there, and one lady kept looking at me, and I said, "What's going on?" She said, "God's showing me your heart." And I was like, "What?" And she started telling me all the things from when I was a little boy, how I'd been hurt, and how the devil had tried to destroy my life. And she asked if she could pray for me. And I said, "Well, absolutely." And she started praying for me, and she started groaning and travailing and strong prayer. I mean, it was incredible, the power of God that I felt, and started telling those devils to come out of me. All that abuse and that anger. And I was a new person. I was a new person. And I want to make sure everyone understands this is way before we ever even knew who Sam and Jane Whaley were. This strong prayer was brought to me by the Spirit of God. And she didn't even realize, what she was doing. She said, "I've never prayed like that before." But, God was coming in, and he was changing my heart. I mean, I was free. It was incredible.
These things, this anger you're talking about, was these just the things you pushed down over
Oh,
the
yeah.
years? You're still in the ministry, but you had all this childhood things that you just pushed down.
Oh, yeah.
And this prayer, you started to feel free?
Yes.
That's
yes.
great. Well, you got just a minute left.
Okay.
So
Oh, Jesus. You want Lorraine to share a little bit?
yeah, that'd be great, Lorraine.
Okay.
If you could just pick back up, and you guys, of course, and I'll just, you guys met at the church there, is that right?
Right.
The
Yes.
church that he's associate minister. You met and got married, and both you got involved with the church. And this was a church that eventually was it Sam and Jane and the Word of Faith affiliated with
Sure.
this church.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so,
From about
would you-
90.
okay, from about 1990, would you both come up here and visit for seminars
Yes.
and that sort of thing?
Yes, we would come for seminars.
Okay, so just if you just got a minute, Lorraine, if you could just share maybe, I know at some point God brought you both here. What year was that?
In 2007.
2007. You both felt, and since you've been here, and just if you got about a minute, if you could just share a few words, just what God's done in your life while you've been here at the church.
Well, I just want to say, the love of God that brings you to the place where you need to be is just incredible to me. I mean, Rich and I have very completely opposite testimonies, really and truly. And the foundation of what's kept us together has been Jesus in our life.
That's right.
And if it wasn't for Jesus, we would have never made it. But God said from the very beginning, and that has been the foundation for everything that we've done. It's what's kept us together. And sad to say, a lot of people get married that Jesus is not there and they don't stay together.
Right.
But, we've been so blessed, we've been married for 16 almost years, almost
Yeah.
17 years, and we have 2 beautiful children,
Yeah.
and we're so happy. I mean, God brought us, we were drowning where we were, going down to a place where we probably would have left God, and God just literally snatched us out of the fire and brought us here to Rutherfordton area to, come to the Word of Faith, and He has changed our hearts so much. I mean, taught us so much, so we're so grateful.
Yes.
I mean, so grateful.
That's great, and thank you so much. And Rich could, of course, keep going on and on. What an amazing story! The thing I love Rich and Lorraine both. They're such blessings. I've known both of them for a long time. I knew them all the way since they were visiting our church for seminars, and then God also they're moving there. God
That's
just
right.
drew them there, and they're just been such a blessing to have in our lives. So thank you again for listening. This is Word of Faith Response, and I hope you continue to listen to us Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 8:30 to 9.